You've waited all summer, and now fall is upon us. To talk college football from the highest points in the country, presented by the Far End of the Bench podcast and the Variety Sports Network. Your home for Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference football, featuring Jimmy Pallotto and Rev, the Problem Koka. Season 3 of Top of the Mountain Podcast. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Season 3. You can finally see the man behind the screen. He hadn't had a camera that could show his mug on camera for the last season when we started doing this show together. I'm talking about my former college teammate, former high school opponent, and all-around MMA guru, expert, football guy, Rev, the Problem Koka. We're back. It's time, and we picked the perfect week. We don't have to deal with any preseason crap like talking about practices, what team is going to look like what. We get to talk right away about games, and there's the questions are out there. This season for the RMAC, it could either go similar to what we've seen for the past couple of years, or it could look very different. But how are you feeling? How was the off season for you, and what have you been up to, man?
Give me a second. Well, now that I got my microphone unmuted, to answer that question, it's really just been up to, being a football junkie, following everything that's going on there. When I have a time to get away from my job, just following and keeping tabs of what's going on, and just lately just getting filled back into like what's going on with the RMAC after last year with the postseason success, and not only that, but also the competitiveness of the teams right behind Colorado School of Mines, which has ultimately put the RMAC in the spotlight a little bit. Well, it's definitely going to be some big shoes to fill this year, but it's definitely exciting to see whether or not the competitiveness kind of sticks around.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the questions that we ask, and it's going to be there's some other things that we're going to address. We're going to make some predictions, and we'll look at the entire week 1 schedule. We normally do, the way the show works is we'll pick two games of the week. We'll recap the games of the week from the previous time, and then look ahead to the upcoming, obviously talk about standings after every week. Today, we're going to just go through all the games, talk about everything, see what is going to be the major storylines. Is this going to be the week that Fort Lewis wins a game for the first time in 3 years? It's been over like 10. It's been over 1,000 days since that has happened. The Skyhawks are in desperate need of something. That's all going to be coming up. But before we get into it, we might as well tell you why we talk about RMAC football, why it's such a passionate thing for the both of us. I mentioned we were college teammates. We went to Western Colorado. Rev was a year older than me. Was one of the mentors in the O-line room when I first got out to Gunnison, and obviously we still love the boys, love seeing what they're doing. And last 2 seasons really have been a lot of fun calling and watching RMAC football and just seeing some of the guys that we've been with, but the way that program has turned itself around, it's not a fluke anymore, and we don't have to talk, are they going to be able to keep it up? They proved it. They talk the talk, now they walk the walk.
Yeah, just from a personal bias perspective, just having our team actually playing competitive football, made it to the playoffs that back in 2021, like it just makes it far more enjoyable than to, during those certain days where we were in 2018 and 2017, in which those are probably seasons that aren't really talked about too much, nor are they really remembered for much reasons at all. So definitely good from that perspective, having our team be competitive, but also, seeing representatives like us and Pueblo and Colorado School of Mines, and hopefully a few more of these teams can step up in there. We saw some hints of what Black Hills could do in that explosive South Dakota Mines offense. So there are some flashes here and there in which can keep the RMAC one of the more relevant upper half conferences in Division II.
It has proven to be in the national competition. We're going to see it. We start off with a couple games where, again, we're seeing the Lone Star Conference and the RMAC, and then also Grand Valley State is going to continue their little rivalry that they've built with Colorado Mines over the last couple years. So we'll be able to talk about that. But we mentioned, and when we had the sports director on for the RMAC last year, he mentioned they want to make it a competitive brand nationally. You know about the Lone Star, you know about some of these other D2 leagues, the ones that have all the history behind it. The RMAC is a little bit, it has history, but for a while Western was like NAIA. RMAC hasn't been a thing, hasn't been D2 forever. So now that it's getting on a bigger stage. Hopefully that damn stadium gets finished sometime soon. I wanted to come out there this season, but it's not going to be done for another year. They're going to be they already have it all scheduled out at the soccer stadium down in Gunnison, which didn't look bad, but it's 500 people, and I think they could probably get at least 1,500 to 2,000 if they had the big stadium for Mountaineer Bowl set up already.
Yeah, like while I am a person who believes that grass is a superior way to play football, football is meant to be played on grass, and also, the conversation about injury prevention and how grass is usually a lot easier and friendlier on people's feet. I will admit that turf field does look pretty nice, though. And then the simple fact that you can put the night lights on, and I wish I saw the RMAC did more often is just have more evening games, but it's a nice setting. It's a small, very niche setting, but the turf's nice, and it doesn't look half bad for now.
They're getting the use out of it that they need because they finished that a season late too. I remember I think it was my last year down there. Maybe I think we finished up at the same year. I can't remember now.
I know what you're talking about.
They finished it a season late, so the soccer team was playing all their home games in Grand Junction, and that was awful. But now they're getting the use out of it. They're playing soccer and football there. They have the spring games. Like, people have been out there. It's a beautiful view. That's one of my favorite places. Like, just to go up, I just go up there and watch. You can see the entire city from up top where the soccer field is. Now we're just reminiscing and wool gathering about Gunnison, but that's what this show normally comes down to. We could also tell the story, like the night lights are going to be fun. It's good that they can practice at night now, especially in Gunnison when the sun after daylight savings goes down at like 4:00. So you get like half an hour of practice after the end of warmups, and then we're like, oh crap, where's Rev? We lost him. Freaking Coach on that season was like the most character building, yet the most miserable I think I've ever been. Was that first year under on.
Yeah, without a doubt. It was weird. Like, fun was definitely had there, but at the same time, we weren't quite winning games, so you just had to pick up your individual victories wherever you could. Man, that season was a cluster.
It was, and then I remember going out. We were in South Dakota playing Black Hills, and it happened to snow, and nobody dressed for the weather. Neither did Coach on, and you just see a big 6'4" Asian guy in a short sleeve polo, just like,
it's like, don't
you gotta be tough.
Cold.
You gotta be tough.
Don't let the cold get to you. And meanwhile, you see him clearly shivering. But
it's I don't know, some of the stuff that we were asked to do.
Man. Yeah. What you want about him? He taught me a lot about just playing football, working with me. So yeah, those were some times though.
It was. If looking back on it now, it definitely made sense what he was trying to do. We thought that he was a tyrant and he just wanted us out on the field as much as possible because he didn't want us to have fun. Now that I'm in the other position and I coach younger kids, I'm like, that extra practice, if you spend 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after what we used to think was an eternity, it's really not all that much extra time. The only bad thing was we would normally get let out after the cafeteria closed, so you have to figure out how to scrounge together like 8 quarters to go get a Big Mac at McDonald's. But other than that, it wasn't the worst.
Yeah. I promise you guys, we'll only have 2 more plays and we'll wrap this up. And that 2 plays always turned to 4, turned to 6.
Yep. No, that's exactly. It's all the way back from youth football. That's what Mark Hill used to do. Oh, last play. It's been the last play for the 15 plays in a row now. We started a whole nother drill after you said last play. Don't give me that last play. This is not. Let's look at the preseason rankings. The question that we're going to talk about first we're going to go, before we do this season's preseason rankings, let's take everybody back. If you didn't watch the RMAC last year, or if you're just catching this now, if you're listening on Variety Sports Network or anything like that, thank you. Be sure to follow at FEOTB Pod. That's where all the updates for this show come out. You can follow Rev at Rev Koka. You still writing for Belly Up? I should know. I should be a better friend, but we haven't talked in a little bit. Are you still writing articles for Belly Up about different things in the sports world?
Well, yeah. As a matter of fact, earlier today I had an article get published, just a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, me being the Steelers fan that I am, just kind of going over just some burning questions that I had, just everything from Pickett strides, any people who could kind of come in and make a year two breakout from a Calvin Austin or a Connor Hayward who kind of went under the radar.
Mhm.
Talked about, yeah, just, Steelers offense stuff. Yeah.
Well, also, this is a good time to ask, and it's live, so I guess I'm putting you on the spot. But Darren wanted to know, are you going to be able to come on? It's 7:45 for us on Sundays for Talking the Gridiron. We definitely want to have you back on this season.
Yeah, it's going to be a very much a week to week thing, but when I can, I'm definitely doing it. Yeah.
The invite's open. I'll probably just send you the link. So if you're free, you can jump on. If not, no big deal. But we definitely want you back on, and we're starting that thing back up again. So if we could look back at the end of the 2022 season, things ended in the following way. Colorado Mines was number one with a 13-3 record. CSU Pueblo in the last season under their former national championship head coach, John Riston, who is now taking over a different role, and they hired Phil Vigil out of Western New Mexico. They were number two last year with an 8-4 record. Western with 7-4 record took third, technically in a tie, but their conference record was better than South Dakota Mines, so they got the edge there. South Dakota Mines, Black Hills, and Western all finished the season 7-4. Mesa finished 4-6. Highlands 3-7. Shadron 3-8. Adams 2-9. And Fort Lewis for the third consecutive year finishes 0-10 and still just giving up an absolutely astronomical amount of points. I don't have their differential in front of me, but the way I looked at it, I know Mines 2 years ago scored 80, and I think they scored like 50 or 60 last year. It has not been pretty for the Skyhawks. Preseason rankings this year, if you look at the bottom of the screen, if you're watching live, if not, you can go back on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe, leave a like and a comment. Colorado Mines predicted to go number one, CSU Pueblo 2, Western 3, South Dakota Mines 4, Black Hills 5, Mesa 6, Shadron 7, New Mexico Highlands 8, Adams 9, Fort Lewis 10. So they basically just took the standings from the end of last season and said, boom, those are going to be our new rankings. My question for you, Rev, are you buying or are you selling? And if so, what are you not sold on when you look at those 10 teams in the RMAC and where the preseason poll rankings put them?
Well, something that I can very much buy right off the bat is just simply Colorado Mines being the system that they are, staying up at the top of the conference. Just them also having a signal caller coming back, John Matoka and Max McLeod, just with that combination. I know they're looking to swap in and out some running backs after Michael Zayman left, and just so there's going to be some turnaround there, but same signal caller, same receiver. You got Nolan Reeve, who had somewhere around 14 sacks last year, coming back around to kind of anchor the defense. And there's enough veteran pieces to kind of keep things around. As for something that I may be selling is just CSU Pueblo perhaps finishing in second place just due to the fact that there's a lot of turnaround. It's a new coaching situation, even, to just turn around at the quarterback. Well, they've always had talent. It's definitely hard to kind of bring together a group of people who was used to one coach, who was recruited by one coach, to kind of turn around and adopt a new system. There's going to be a lot of turnaround there.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of a unique perspective. My brother just finished his time at CSU Pueblo on the football team. He was there for last semester after they hired V Hill. My sister is currently the football operations person at CSU Pueblo, so she's seeing it on a day-to-day basis, and she deals a lot with the coaching staff. It is a different. It's what he wants to do. He wanted to come in and make it his own, which good on him. I think you either have to continue building what was there, or you got to make it totally your own. We see that a lot in the NFL when guys go out from under their old coaches and they try and bring whatever culture they had at the other place. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I know that there's been a lot of turnover on the roster. I know that guys that have been there and have put in a lot of time in the program aren't necessarily getting, some of them are happy, some of them aren't. It is going to be interesting because they'll start the season off against the Lone Star Conference foe, and then they go right the second week into Grand Valley. So they're going to have two really, really tough games right off the bat, Midwestern from Texas and then Grand Valley in week 2. But going back to Colorado Mines, my thing, it's the same exact schedule, just like it was last year. they're going to get tested right out of the gate, which is good. And when they get to the RMAC games, nobody except for maybe Western, and I can't think of any other game that was really close for them last year in conference. But Western seems to be the only team the last couple of years that has given them a run. Once they get to their RMAC schedule, I'm just assuming that's when they're going to start fine-tuning things. But those first 2 weeks, just like they have been for the last 2 years for Colorado Mines, is going to tell us a lot about the Ore Diggers. And is Matoka going to continue that stretch? Are they going to be able to replace Zeman in the backfield because he's been there for a long time? There are some questions, but the good thing about Colorado Mines is the schedule that they have and they've kept for the last however many years tells us right off the bat.
Yeah, and another thing is definitely the voting committee looks at the fact that Colorado Mines is scheduling their matchups so tough to the point where they give them a little bit of leeway, especially when you consider the factor of how those losses came, kind of just starting a little too slow against Grand Valley and climbing back into the game, but they just didn't have enough time. But it's definitely something where the committee sees how hard Colorado Mines schedules themselves out of conference. And even if they have 2 losses on the record, they'll understand, like, there's weight that gets held behind those losses.
Yeah. I'm interested if CSU Pueblo doesn't finish second, who do you have finishing in the second spot? Possibly, is it close at the top? Do you think Mines kind of seals it up? Or are we going to see a possibility for it coming down to the last game of the season? And who is that other team? Is it Western? Is it maybe South Dakota Mines taking another step forward? Or maybe one of these other teams at the bottom who've been around the bottom for a while? Do you think it's finally their time?
You kind of stole the first 2 candidates I was thinking of in terms of second and third place. I think I kind of have Pueblo situated in that 4th place finish just with the amount of turnaround going around. Whereas with Western, there's still Coach Baines has been around there forever. Coach Auer as a defensive coordinator is always going to, put things together, scheme up twists, stunts, blitzes, and creative ways to put pressure on people. So the foundations are still there. Like, the coaching culture is still there. Whereas with South Dakota Mines, with Joe Hansen returning at quarterback in the electrifying passing game they had there, I think those are the 2 teams that are going to take that second and third spot. So it's kind of where I have it right now.
Then let's look at the bottom 4 of those teams. Who has the best likelihood of jumping somebody in front of them? So Chadron at 7 could possibly, I think they've been really close, or they should have been better the last 2 seasons. They had a 14-point lead against Angelo State going in the second half 2 years ago, and I watched them blow that lead. It's always something that happens. So is Chadron maybe a team that you think might be able to put it together, jump up into that upper half, or is there a team, is the bottom 4 going to stay the bottom 4? Because that's basically been the basement of the conference for the last 2-3 years.
I can see some potential jumps just based off of Chadron staying what they do defensively. If they can find any bit of life on the offensive side of the ball, or even a team like New Mexico Highlands, who there always seems to be a lot of turnaround where they could just find somebody random and find a bunch of walk-ons who just kind of slip through the cracks and build a team off of that. While there's not a lot of continuity from that, but they definitely find a way to get a hold of those talents. So I can see Chadron State potentially sneaking their way into that halfway point of the conference. I believe they got Hunter O'Connor coming back, who kind of had that breakout season last year. And if he can kind of spearhead things around, I could definitely see Chadron finishing maybe around 5th place.
Yeah, it's tough in college football, and that's we're not a D1 show, but obviously the biggest story of college football in the Colorado area right now is CU with Coach Prime. It's difficult enough to win 1 or 2 more games in a season. It's really, really hard to go any higher than that. So 2 or 3 more wins for Chadron takes them to like 4 and 5, maybe 5 and 4 if you get lucky in another spot, and that's going to be difficult. Any of those teams. Fort Lewis to win 3 games this year, they should throw a parade, because Durango, like I said, it's been over 1,000 days since they've had a victory to celebrate, and that's not normally how they were. Even when we were playing against them, maybe they were never up in the top of the rankings, but they were never just a walkover. And for however many years now, teams that go to Durango go to get right. Like, if you have a bad week before, you're like, oh, cool, I'll score 5 touchdowns against Fort Lewis. I'll go down to Durango and absolutely have a field day and get myself back right. So it's interesting to see to think about. Are these teams going to be better? And if they are, can they get that much better to take the next step? You very rarely see a turnaround like you did. We were there. Western from 2015 to 2016, go 4-5 to 7-4 in a season. That was a total turn, or excuse me, 4-8. I think 4-8. Yeah, 4-7.
Yeah, and it's especially hard to have that turnaround where it kind of feels like you're picking up from the scratch recruiting wise, because once you're going down to Division 2 level, you really have to find whatever diamond in the rough that wasn't picked up from the FCS level or the Division 1 level. And you really got to just, have a keen eye for scouting to really pick up from whatever is left from the scraps. So a team like Fort Lewis is going to perhaps need a turnaround like what Deion Sanders is trying to do with Colorado. Bring in whatever 4-star, 5-star talent that you can and kind of go with your staff, bring some of those people from Jackson State, recruit people elsewhere, and just it's really a start from square one. But it feels like Fort Lewis has been trying to do that for like the past couple of years. We first started to see signs of them kind of on a decline in 2018, I believe, when they finished 1-9. So it's kind of hard to do that rebuild when you're picking up scraps.
And we forget too, like some teams did not handle the pandemic very well. And I would say Fort Lewis is one of those teams that at the very top of the list, their program just didn't recover after things were able to go back to normal. I know Western took a beating at Stephen F. Austin during the pandemic. So that was rough for them, but they
didn't happen.
Yeah, I would rather it not happen too, but I honestly kept those guys. They at least had one other game, so when they came back to the next season, they had some semblance of what traveling was going to be like. That's one of the toughest things for a college athlete to get used to is you're traveling, and if you're on a bus like we were and you're going far away, it's 3-4 days of class that you're missing, and you're going to have to figure out how to balance the rest of your life outside of the schedule that you have. And unfortunately, nobody in the RMAC has the budget to be able to fly anywhere, except for maybe Colorado Mines.
Yeah, that's definitely an adjustment. Just even remembering those South Dakota trips, like 15 to 16 hours. And on the way back, we would literally just do it straight. So, yeah, it's definitely an adjustment, making sure that you have your priorities to managing your time very well. These are 18 to 22-year-old kids. They don't always do that. But, yeah, it's definitely an adjustment. And not to mention the struggles of COVID, something that you brought up there, just being able to maintain people on the roster, because there are people who left and just decided, I don't want to stick around for a year. Like, hey, imagine if Western still had Drew Barry in 2021 or 2022, he decided to just go elsewhere. That's just one example of a person we knew personally who was a second-team RMAC offensive lineman, where perhaps even if you want to play football, you have to do something else where do what's best for you. And some people just didn't want to stick around for a year. And it seemed to have decimated a team like Fort Lewis.
That seems to be, that gap year. You either came back hungry or you just decided that it was time to move on. That would have been something, because they would have had Drew Barrier on the offensive line, and then Will for his last season when he had all of those stats. Will Lytle, former guest of this show, and then also former teammate of the both of us, now playing over in Finland and making those European boys wish they didn't sign up for tackle football. I don't know if you've seen some of those highlights, but I'm like, damn. Will
he's a quarterback hunter still, as he always is.
I think he's about ready to break the league record for sacks. They're like, I've never seen anybody hit double-digit sacks. I'm like, I know. He can do that against pretty much any. He's if he gets a shot, I think he can maybe make a little bit of a push. It's going to be tough because the higher level you go, it's going to be different. Maybe I want to see if he gets a shot in one of these spring leagues in America. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I don't know if size-wise he pairs up, but naturally you see his talent, you see him play, and I would love to see him get a USFL spot. Like, even watching Deion Sizer out there, former nose tackle for CSU Pueblo guy, I used to play against in high school at the USFL level. Like, anywhere we can see our RMAC talent playing in the league like that or the XFL, I'm here for it. And I think Will definitely has the ability and just the natural quickness to play at that level.
And he's just naturally strong. I know you were one of his workout partners because you were naturally strong that way too. But working out with Will was a different experience, and he doesn't back down against offensive linemen or against 500 pounds on the bar, no matter what he's doing.
he doesn't leave weight for nobody in that weight room. So
No. He lifts all the weights, every single one that you can put on, and he does. It's not technique; it's literal just strength. Because I watched him squat 600 pounds with a curve in his back, and I thought, how are you walking after that? That doesn't make sense. All right, let's look at the schedule for Week 1. We did have a few games currently taking place, so I'm going to mention what the matchups are. Shadron was in Quincy, Illinois, taking on Quincy University. Mexico Highlands was out in Portales, New Mexico. They're playing Eastern New Mexico. That game's just about to kick off. And then Grand Valley and School of Mines playing in Golden. I believe that is being carried on Channel 2. It's also on the RMAC network. The other two games not on the RMAC network since the host team is not an RMAC school. But we do have already games kicking off today, the last day of August. Tomorrow, South Dakota Mines will take on Valley City State. So we have plenty of football to talk before we even get to Saturday. Grand Valley versus Colorado Mines. Do you think Colorado Mines learns from their mistake last year and doesn't play with their food, tries to come out a little bit hotter and punch Grand Valley in the mouth? We know that Grand Valley is one of the top teams in the country.
Yeah, it's going to be a dogfight no matter how you slice it. However, yeah, I think it's going to be somewhat the opposite, where Colorado Mines punches them in the mouth at the beginning of the game, and perhaps Grand Valley has to regroup and try to build their way back into the game. But I'm confident that the Ore Diggers have enough here, just with the amount of turnaround they have on both sides of the ball. Having veteran, experienced people, especially at the collegiate level, is so important here. And I think the people that they have here is going to be enough for them to get that bad taste out of their mouth from last year. And just with how high powered the offense is, how disciplined the defense is, where they're really not a team that's going to throw too many stunts and games at you, but they're confident they can just beat you with their base. And the way that they load up talent here, even though you think about the difficulties that they have picking people who are predominantly in one educational field when it comes to engineering, yet they still find ways to find talent within like this niche area of study. Like they have a system here. They've figured out how to do it. And I think they have enough turnaround here to pull off the win this time.
It doesn't seem to matter the coaching staff because they had a new coaching staff come in last year and they picked up right where they left off, even got a little bit better. Update for the Shadron game. They are down currently. It's the start of the second quarter, 7-0. Quincy University had a run go for 97 yards and a touchdown. They should tell me who. Michael Owens, possibly. He also kicks the extra points. Damn. Talk about a Booby Miles. He'll walk your dog, paint your back porch. He does everything. The boy can flat play football. Mexico Highlands and Eastern Mexico also just kicking off, so we're not going to have a score update for them.
New Mexico there.
Yeah, it's
supremacy.
Eastern New Mexico. I don't even know if I have anybody. I know Western New Mexico used to be in the RMAC. Eastern New Mexico, I have no clue about. Maybe they used to be, and that's a team that my dad used to travel to.
I know they recruited people from the area who I either played against or knew in high school, so I've been aware of them as a team. Probably, I remember there was a year, and I think they played Colorado Mesa, but yeah, perhaps maybe back in the day they were in our conference. But
I think there was a time that they were, but now. Moving on to tomorrow night's game. Let's see. Where exactly does Valley City come from? Valley City is a school in North Dakota. So it's North Dakota versus South Dakota tomorrow night when South Dakota Mines takes the field. It's their home opener. Kickoff will be at 6 o'clock, and that will be on the RMAC network since it's at South Dakota Mines. Valley City State, don't really know much about them, but South Dakota Mines, if they are going to announce themselves and possibly move even higher than 4, because it's great. This is the highest preseason ranking that I think I can remember them having since they joined the conference. This is a statement. As I'm doing some research here, Valley City already did have one game. They played week 0. They got a win over the University of Jamestown in their home opener, 23-15. And then going back to last season, Valley City ended 5-5. So they're just a middle of the pack team in the conference that they play in. If you're going to be that upper echelon of the RMAC, this is a school that you go out there and you do everything that you have to do and make the statement that you are able to make. This is not a time to play around. Do not play with your food. Come out and fire right off the bat. That's I think what the Hard Rockers are going to be looking to do tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's a little harder to do research on these teams out of the conference, especially I see Valley Cities, and that's an NAIA school. However, I do know those NAIA versus Division II matchups could be oftentimes a little rougher on the NAIA schools. And I think this matchup is here for South Dakota Mines to build up their confidence and perhaps, get a double-digit lead and make a statement here to show that they're still amongst the upper echelon of the RMAC, and I see them getting it done here.
Moving on to Saturday's games, Fort Lewis going to Liberty, Missouri. They're playing William Jewell, who they've had a couple of games against RMAC opponents in week one over the past couple of years. So they're a NAIA school out of Missouri. That is going to be, if Fort Lewis is going to break that epic losing streak, you probably are going to expect them to do it against the NAIA school. I don't believe that they had a matchup last year. I'm trying to quickly double check the roster, or excuse me, the schedule from last season for the Jayhawks. That is the mascot. Let's see. Not 2023, 2022.
Let me look this up to myself here.
They played, so last year William Jewell played Colorado Mesa and Black Hills, and they lost both of those games. So it wasn't Fort Lewis. So if Fort Lewis is going to break this streak, it might be able to be against this team who scored a total of 14 and 19 points against RMAC opponents in the last year plus. This is their chance. Last season, William Jewell ended 2-9. We all know, we already said that Fort Lewis ended the season 0-10. They kick things off at 10 a.m. That one won't be available on the RMAC network. Neither will the next game on the schedule, which is Black Hills going up to St. Paul, Minnesota, and playing the University of St. Thomas. Again, no idea anything about them, except that they play in St. Paul, Minnesota. That one will be at 12 p.m. Then the games, all the rest of the games are on the RMAC network. So I guess Black Hills might be able to show something. Do you know anything about the University of St. Paul as I'm pulling up their school website now?
Yeah, I don't know too much about them, period. However, I see they're saying that it's an FCS school, so they're challenging tough going up, but yeah, I don't really know too much about them, but clearly they're more seasoned and accustomed to playing rougher teams. However, there's still variables here and there. Like, for example, I hate to send a shot towards Dixie State or Utah Tech, but like they may have moved up to a division, but I don't see them as anything beyond RMAC talent. And for the most part, they're racking up losses there at their conference.
I would agree with you, except that I just looked at the 2022 schedule for University of St. Paul, and they were 10-1 and undefeated at home. So that might just be a money game for Black Hills, and they're going to start the season up next week.
There, or
let's see. So in the playoffs, what I believe to be the playoffs, I think they won the first round, and then they lost the second round against Butler.
Oh, fair enough.
But they played Southern Utah last year, which is a decent program up in that level. This year they'll play Harvard, and they had some other FCS schools that we've heard of. South Dakota is decent at the FCS level, always tough. And then Drake University, they'll play Butler again. I believe they're in the same conference as Butler, so they're going to be battle hardened. Like I said, that might be one that you just chalk up as let's go get experience, let's travel a little bit, and then hopefully we can bring that experience. And then also too, you talked about the voters. At the end of the preseason, if the University of St. Paul goes 10-1 again, and that's one of Black Hills' 2-3 losses, they're going to be bumped up into that conversation. So it's not the worst thing, not the dumbest strategy that I've seen, but that is going to be a tough matchup for the Yellow Jackets. Starting off at 1 p.m., Gunnison, Colorado, home opener for the Western Colorado University Mountaineers. They host the West Texas A&M Buffaloes at 1 p.m. at the Katie O'Ready Field. Will be available on the RMAC. I'm sure they'll have Chuck, and Lane was calling the games last year with them. I don't know if he's going to be back, but they'll be on the call for the RMAC network. It's not going to be an easy one. That's another Lone Star Conference team. Lone Star Conference is one of the best in D2, but they haven't been West. I think Western beat them in the last couple seasons, if I'm not
Well,
mistaken.
they lost to them last year, and it was a pretty bad loss. However,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see them as being a tier above Western. They're just kind of a game where they were sleepwalking. Josh Cummings wasn't playing, and they just weren't able to match with them offensively. But I think they
It's
kind of found their rhythm later on in the year a little bit.
when they're going to Texas too, like playing in Texas is different because not many of the guys on Western's team is used to that atmosphere. But I think that having it in Gunnison, they have to come up to 7,700 feet elevation. That's a home field advantage that it always turns the games close. So I'm hoping it's a good showing. Let the boys play. I want to see the boys play. Next game at 1:00, Texas A&M Kingsville coming out to Grand Junction. They're going to take on Mesa, who is predicted to finish 6th in the RMAC preseason rankings at Stoker Stadium. I like to say Stocker Stadium, but they say Stoker. Any thoughts on the Mesa matchup against Texas A&M Kingsville?
All I know is that Kingsville is within that Lone Star Conference, but I don't necessarily know exactly where they finished there. Whether they're kind of grouped together with Midwestern State, which is kind of the upper half, or a West Texas A&M. However, there's definitely some questions to answer on offense. Where ever since Peter Anderson left that receiver and has been doing his thing overseas in Europe, also another RMAC guy playing well in Europe. But ever since they kind of had some turnaround there, seems like they've been struggling to find an offensive identity. So whether or not they can figure that out, or if their defense can keep them close enough in games and like kind of bend and don't break, if it just kind of feels like there's been a bit of a halfway rebuild where they're good enough to compete, but they're not the team that they used to be back in like 2017. And
they had a coach for over 20 years, and now I think they're on their third coach in the last 3 seasons. Or this is the second season for the guy that they just hired. The turnaround has been crazy for the Mavericks. So that's kind of where I see them struggling. Kingsville last year finished the season 7-5 in the Lone Star Conference. They're not terrible, and obviously they're going to get guys that have talent because you get all the guys who couldn't make it at D1 or JUCO from Texas going to Kingsville. So the Javelinas are going to be a tough matchup. Then we get to the 6 p.m. games, and that is Lincoln University, who actually made their way out to Gunnison and played Western last season, and this will be their 3rd year of existence as a football program. Adams definitely scheduled this one to get off on the right foot. They have one of the most explosive offenses in the RMAC. I think they're going to walk all over Lincoln University out of California. I think they're D3 school, honestly, is the level that they started at, D3 or NAIA. So that one's going to be a cakewalk. The most interesting one to me, and the one that I'll get firsthand accounts from because my parents will be in attendance, is Midwestern State, their rematch against CSU Pueblo. Pueblo went out to Texas and kind of beat them up last year. So they're looking for revenge. It's Coach V. Hill's debut for CSU Pueblo and the Thunderwolves. Do you share my opinion that this is probably the most interesting matchup besides the one going on currently against Colorado Mines and Grand Valley?
I would have to say it's basically between that and Western also. So it's between that and yeah, in terms of how the game comes out or how the game turns out, I just want to get your thoughts on that first as to how you think Pueblo matches up. There's turnaround here. They sent the guy out who almost made an NFL roster, but was on a training camp spot in Trey Botts. And as you've seen lately, Pueblo's kind of been pulling out and churning out like noses and defensive linemen and defensive players who have gotten NFL attention where there's turnaround now. And I'm just wondering what you're going to expect from them and their new coaching staff.
Trying to be as respectful since we're technically the media as possible, because I have stories that I can share and stories that I probably shouldn't. I don't know exactly how the team down there is going to respond because I don't have anybody that's been in the locker room since fall camp. My brother finished his spring ball last year and then he graduated, so he wasn't around for any of the preseason. He wasn't at the summer conditioning. My sister said they were working out early in the morning, but is some of it it's all up in the air. That's the hard thing about D2, especially when a new coaching staff comes in. At the D1 level, it's easy to go back and find how this coach built success at a particular program. It's hard enough to find anything on Western New Mexico, anyways. And seeing, I don't know the foundational pieces that V Hill might have put in there. So I'm not sure exactly how this is going to turn out. It might be a breath of fresh air that the university needed because Riston had been there since the program was reinstated. Or, things could not turn out the way that people are expecting. And I don't know, the people of Pueblo don't necessarily, they make changes fairly quickly if you lose favor. Like the DeRoses took their name off the Thunder Bowl for decisions made over the last 2 years. Things can go poorly in a hurry. So I'm honestly, it's up in the air. It's going to be an intriguing game to watch, but I have no clue how this thing is going to turn out.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a Midwestern state win. And perhaps if Pueblo proves me wrong, maybe in the second half of the year, they can find their team identity. But yeah, I really don't know what to expect.
Just an update so far. 11:42 left in the first quarter for Grand Valley and Colorado Mines. Nobody scored. Mines had the ball first, and they had to punt after gaining a couple first downs. So another really tight matchup between those two schools. Obviously, two of the top in all of the Division II programming. Last thing that we have to get into, because we're about up at the end of the show, and we're going to keep track of this. So I've got it a sticky note because I am a middle school teacher now, so I always have my school supplies prepared. We're going to write down our predictions, RMAC champions for the 2023 season, and possible playoff representation for the RMAC conference. Who do you think has the ability to win the conference? And if there's more than one team that's going to the playoffs, who would those teams be? So I'm going to let you start since I have to be the one to record it.
Right now, when you consider both team turnaround as well as overall talent, I see this year Colorado Mines being the only team. I believe last year Pueblo snuck their way into the first round, but yeah. I think this year there's too much turnaround where you could almost always guarantee there being talent being drawn into that area because there's not a whole lot to do outside of play football there. And they seem to always recruit a decent number of talent around the area. But I think there's too much turnaround here. And I see the lone team getting in being Colorado School of Mines.
I think Mines is also going to win the RMAC. I want to say that I'm interested – all the videos that I see coming out of Gunnison, and I have to get out there in person a little bit more. It's tough with school and coaching the youth kids. So it's hard, but everything that I see, and it seems like their recruiting is bumped up. They're getting guys that have the size, more size than what they were initially. We used to be one of the smaller teams and one of the slower teams. And now the last few years of success and playoff contention and playoff exposure, it seems to have given them like a lot of bullets to put in the chamber. So if those guys can maybe solidify themselves and get a big win in week one, and then just quickly looking ahead to next week, they're going to be playing Texas Permian Basin in Gunnison. So they finally start the year off 2 home games. They don't go on the road until week 3. And that could be a severely beaten up CSU Pueblo team because they get CSU Pueblo after they face Midwestern and Grand Valley in back-to-back weeks. So if Western can get themselves right in the beginning of the season, I could see them challenging Mines for a possible either tie co-RMAC championship or pushing them. And if they continue to do so, and if they win these out-of-conference games against Lone Star opponents, I'm going to say Western Colorado has a really good shot to make the playoffs, even if they don't win the RMAC, possibly get that second spot for the Super Regional. Maybe that's a pandering pick. I'm going to post this in the Western Facebook group, so maybe I'm just trying to earn brownie points, and maybe it's just because I'm a homer and a former alumni, but I could see it happening. Don't tell me it's impossible to me.
Yeah, I'm really just alternating second and third place right now between South Dakota Mines and Western. However, I will agree, like, as long as Western has Coach Arrow as defensive coordinator, it seems like no matter what he has, whether it's, stronger, bigger recruits like they're getting now, or undersized recruits and a smaller team with 195-pound linebackers going around the place. And no matter what, it seems like Coach Auer is always going to be able to keep these guys ready to play. I remember And of course, you remember too the days just seeing them doing rabies and doing up downs and sprinting halfway across the field. Like there's a certain amount
Rabies.
of there's a certain amount of mentality there that Coach R is going to teach to those guys, where they're going to be in and they're going to be ready to play. And they also have a deep roster of people coming in. I'm excited to see some of the people who I remember from back then, or who we remember from our playing days, whether it's Malcolm Wesley playing corner, just a gifted athlete he is, Trevor Reeder still being around there, and
Little
even
brother at receiver.
yeah, Cole at receiver, and then Anthony Johnston, who's kind of stepped in and given them very good play on the defensive line, and just seeing how with those few people right there, like how can they rally on defense? And then yeah, like I said, I got South Dakota Mines right there with them, just with their offense.
It's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. We're going to be right there with them every step of the way. Hopefully we got more RMAC playoff football to talk about, but we got plenty of regular season to go before then. That's going to do it for the first episode. Like I said at the beginning, thank you guys for tuning in. This show will be live Thursday nights. You'll be able to hear it. It's part of a pretty long content marathon that we give you now during football season at the far end of the bench. If you haven't heard episode 149, podcast is available on the YouTube channel that you might be watching live on, or all audio platforms. If you just search Far End of the Bench, be sure to follow, leave a 5-star rating and a review there. Sunday Scaries will be back on Sunday. We're going to have Darren Briere on that show to talk a little bit about being a dean at the school now, from the Fat Boy Fadeaway Sports Podcast. And then obviously be sure to follow at variety_sports_. Super happy to be a part of them. And then check out Rev's content through Belly Up, and then be sure to follow him, especially if you're an MMA fan, because he's always watching the UFC events, and he will put his thoughts out there in the Twitterverse or the Xverse. I don't know if we changed over yet, but
yeah, it's still Twitter to me. But yeah,
it'll
X,
never change. It's always a tweet.
Yeah.
I always tweet. It's not a post. I can't post on Twitter.
You
So be sure to follow him at Rev Koka. You can see it on the screen here. Rev, it's great as always. We got back together. We've been doing this for a while. We were radio partners back in college, and now we're continuing on. Hopefully we'll see you on Talking the Gridiron, but we'll have this show every week. I don't have anything else. You got anything to send the people off with?
No, not a whole lot of anything else here. Just check out Far End of the Bench. Check out my articles. Yeah, I'll make it over to the show on Variety Sports whenever I can with Darren and the boys. And yeah, I mean, it's the best time of the year, man.
Nothing better. Football season. Everybody enjoy. Have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you back on Sunday for Sunday Scaries. For now, this has been Top of the Mountain, Season 3 preview episode. Thank you guys for listening. We will see you next time.